People say simple pieces are easy, but this three-line Bach prelude proves otherwise. It's packed with lessons in phrasing, fingering, and structure, more than some full pages of Chopin. I've taught it to everyone, beginners, advanced students, even professionals, and every single one of them walked away surprised by how much they had missed the first time through. In fact, back in 2016, when I was preparing Chopin's E minor piano concerto for a performance with orchestra, I had just 5 months to learn that piece from scratch. Naturally, that's all I wanted to work on with my teacher. But because I had just started studying with him, he saw some deeper issues in my playing and made me perfect this little Bach prelude before he would even hear my concerto. He said, if you nail this piece, the rest of your concerto will go a lot faster for you. I was equally insulted and intrigued, especially since I was almost a professional player already at this point, and I'm going back to beginner Bach. So strap in, because once you see what's really happening inside these 3 lines, you'll never look at Bach, or any music for that matter, the same way again. I want to introduce this idea that I call compare and contrast. And basically what that is it's finding things that are similar and finding things that are different. But most importantly, how similar things are different, if I put it that way. So for example, we see a little group here. We see what I call a mountain pattern. I like to play a game called Connect the Dots. I'm sure you've seen this. In other cases, we've probably all played this as kids, where you just, connect the dots and it forms like a lizard or an animal pattern or something. But in this case, I like to describe the pattern formed through visuals. And whenever you have notes go up and then back down, it's what I call a mountain. So it kind of creates that little mountain peak. And then you've got a leap. A leap is anything generally above a fourth. Sometimes some people consider a fourth a leap. But, it's a seventh in this case. And then you got a step, which is anything 2 letters back to back. That right there forms the basis of this entire piece. And when you understand that, you can start the compare and contrast practice. So mountain shape, leap, 2 notes, step, 2 notes. We get 4 plus 2 plus 2. Hang on. It writes it in the middle of the page and then I have to move it later. Oh, and so here's what's cool about that is you can actually then categorize the 3 different things individually. Mountain, leap, step, in that order is how they actually appear. But as you'll see, there's like a few things Bach does to kind of change that up. So if we look at this, we get a mountain, a leap, and a step. End of passage. A mountain, a leap, and a step. Here's our first change. It's not a step to just a single note. It's now a step to a whole chord. So that doesn't change anything fundamentally, but it's a little different. Then you get mountain, leap, step. I could go on and on. I'm not going to give you all the answers because the whole point and the challenge of this is to figure out where they all are yourself. But what you want to compare between them, for example, is what aspects are similar and what are different. So the order is always the same. Mountain first, then leap, then step. But I'll do the first 3 for you to give an example. This is a pure triad in root position. So C major, a third, and a third. Now if we look at the next mountain, it's a fourth, a third, and a third. So still same overall pattern, but a different interval thing. Then we've got a third, and a third. So more like the first one. So like number 1 and number 3 are related, but number 2 is only vaguely related, and just in the sense of the intervals. And that's why you're comparing them all, but you're also contrasting them all. It's not that the contrast means it's completely different material. It just simply means that the material is changed in some way. And people often miss those details when you just learn it in order, like from left to right. When you look at it like this, you start to notice those little subtleties in a more conscious way. My friends, if you have been enjoying this video, make sure to download my free piano progress guide. It's linked in the description and the pinned comment, and you can start seeing greater progress with in-depth insights like this today. So here's another one, the leap part. The leap is a seventh here from C to B flat. Here it's an octave though, an eighth, C to C. Then here we get a seventh, G to F. So check that out. Once again, number 1 and number 3 are related, but 2 is the outlier. Okay, so now we get the step. It's a stepwise thing that goes up, G to A, then A to B, then D to E. So actually every single one of those 3 are related. So see how, like, when we divide the main 8 note phrase into the 3 little units, we get not a complete consistency. The first 2 units are related on the first and third, but the third unit is the same all 3 times. So even there's some contrast, and it's not totally uniform. And then we've got it in the left hand, in the right hand, in both hands. And so there's lots of little ways to find how Bach takes this very simple 8-note idea and transforms it. That's the first thing I would notice. And the next thing is, I would say, just really watch out for all your fingerings. I would put that in first before I do anything else. There's a lot of fingerings in this particular edition, which I got on IMSLP, but it doesn't mean I necessarily agree with every fingering in this edition. So keep that in mind. You're welcome to change whatever you don't like. One thing I like to do, though, is kind of pretend this is an organ piece. It's unclear whether this would have been harpsichord or clavichord or organ, but I think it implies organ just because you have these really long whole notes in the bass and then the long whole note at the end. And it certainly sounds good on harpsichord and absolutely can be done on harpsichord, but I just kind of like this big, warm, rich pedal tone feel that the organ produces. So when I play it on the piano, I imagine that, and I take a much larger, almost Busoni-like sound to it, even though I don't add notes and double it in octaves or something. But I kind of imagine that, like as if Brahms wrote it. And why was I going there? I had a point to that. Yeah, with the chords, I don't see them as light and articulate. I see them as rich and full. And so for fingering, let's see. Actually, I do like these two. There's this idea of chord connections that I've talked about in other videos, where you connect some of the hand, but not all of the hand. And you connect what can be connected and not what can't. So if the same finger, like 1-1, moves, then of course you can't connect that because the finger has to lift before it goes there. This is assuming you're not using pedal. And then if the finger doesn't move, but the note is the same, it has to be lifted to play again. So the bottom 2 voices here cannot be connected. But the top, E to D, is moving, and it's a different finger. And if you follow this fingering, it can be connected. So you can get a really smooth result going from E to D while treating these as like half of their value. So what it looks like on paper is that you have a 3-note quarter note. But in reality, how I would physically play it is the quarter note on top, lasting until here. And then these 2 are like an 8th note with an 8th note rest, like that. And notice how then that 8th note rest is in accordance with the 8th note of the left hand. So you actually choreograph the lift of this hand with the other hand for your practice. You have to be really disciplined about this and very slow and patient. But it's so worth the work because then you get a lot more reliable muscle memory, and in the end, you can get it in your fingers much faster. So you could write in the actual rhythm values. My shorthand is just write an X wherever you're lifting it in accordance to the other hand. And you'll kind of see that in other videos I do down the road. But here we go. So here's another opportunity. I need to scroll out. There we go. So see this chord going to this chord. Depending on the fingering, you can do the same thing. So I'll give you this one fingering, 5, 4, 2. Oh, it's hard in a document there. Do it that way. I do 5, 4, 2 so that I can connect the bottom 2. See, because the D is repeated again, so that of course cannot be connected. But if you do 2 and 4 on the A and C, then you can do 1 and 3 on the G and B. And that gives you 5, 3, 1, which means you can still get a very smooth over the bar connection. And again, I do this because I see this as sort of an organ piece. It feels very full and rich and almost like a chorale to me when you get these chords. And notice the only chords in the whole piece are these measures right here and then like right at the end. Because even these are just dyads, meaning 2 voices. They definitely imply chords and harmony, but they're not like full stacks. So I think this third section, middle section, what how do you even call it? I don't know. Measure 4, 5, and 7, let's just put it that way. All have kind of a richer sonority. Not necessarily the climax of the piece, but at least just a fuller sound. So that's how I would kind of view these things. And again, whenever you're not going to connect something, you want to draw a visual reminder that you're not actually holding it. So the X in accordance with that F sharp in the left hand. Remember the F sharp is carried over from here. So that kind of handles everything. So we've got fingering, we've got compare and contrast, we've got grouping, we've got chord connections. And then I also use pedal in this one, but it's kind of beyond the scope of a simple video tutorial like this. So I'll probably go into that later. Maybe a separate video, we'll see. In any case, one other thing that a lot of people run into is just tempo. Just having problems with the tempo. I personally find this 126 too fast, and it is not Bach's official tempo. It's just the editor. Forget who edited this one. It might have actually been Czerny, if I remember right. But in any case, it's still not a required tempo. In fact, I don't even think Bach wrote Allegro. So I personally like it more in the 80 to 100 range. That's a big range, but I think I always take it around 92 myself. That's just kind of a matter of taste. I think it needs to feel like it moves forward, but it also needs to feel kind of broad and full of sonority. So it's up to me. And the reason I feel it that way is because most of it is triadic. You're getting chords throughout almost every single measure. There's not a lot of stepwise motion, so the ear perceives that as much thicker, even though you're only playing one note at a time in many cases. So yeah, just some things to think about. But that gives us then a double speed thing at the end. So I would use this scale as a warm-up. I found a lot of people are doing fine, and then they get to this scale and they really way slow down because they don't have the technique, or they just didn't put in the practice to truly double the speed they had before. So like do 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 do. It's not like impossibly fast, but it's just kind of like you're playing eighth notes for the whole piece, and then out of the blue you have to play sixteenths. So don't underestimate that. Don't just run through it a few times and think, oh, I'm good. It's easy to miss that one. And then, oh, quick thing on the ornaments. We've got just a simple ornament like written out here. Is exactly how I did it, except, hey, did I do it on the beat? Yeah, I did. I did it exactly like that rhythm too. And the fingering is so key here, the 2, 3, 1, because you could do 1, 2, 1, but, and I've had students actually want to do it that way, 1, 2, 1, and every time they change their mind after a couple weeks because it ends up not working. The 2, 3, 1 causes the G to lift, so you can rearticulate it because it's a different finger. But there's something about using 1, 2, 1 that makes it feel harder because the 1 hasn't properly lifted, so then it's sticky and you don't get the rearticulation as well. So I really like that 2, 3, 1. Diddly do, diddly do. It just kind of creates a bite and an articulation that's really nice there. Yes. Oh, one more thing, fingering. Sorry, kind of jumping all around here. But this is really important here. Depending on how much music theory you have in your background, this is a really, really important moment to understand. If you don't know the theory of it, just know this. It's really, really important that that E is still held and then actually connects to the D. I'll explain why in a second, but before I lose you, if you don't know the theory, I'm going to show you why. So first of all, it's tied. So Bach wouldn't have tied it over the bar if he didn't want it over the bar. That's point number one. He easily could have written a quarter note and an eighth rest, but he chose not to do that. And that would have actually fit with the rest of the piece, because see how this is, again, the mountain, the leap, and the step. So we've got that same pattern. And when we first had that, it started with a rest. So he deliberately avoids doing that in this case. That's point number one. Point number two is the harmony of it. It's an A minor 7 chord going to an F sharp half diminished 7th chord, which is really, as you find out after that, it's really a D7. Now, that sounds maybe a little fancy for those that don't know theory, but A minor 7, let me put that in here. And then we go D7 right here. The E belongs to the A minor 7, but not to the D7, which means this is what we would call a NCT, non-chord tone, or some people call that an NHT, non-harmonic tone. Meaning the E is actually, quote unquote, a wrong note against the F sharp here. And so if it's not still heard and perceived as you change the bass note, it won't really have its proper effect. Now that's a lot of explanation for a really short moment for a really small detail, but that's the kind of detail that I was trained to play Bach in. And whether or not my audience hears it, I can't really say. But I can say that I personally enjoy playing Bach more because I go to this level of detail. And it's more than just holding it. Like it's really attuning your ear to the fact that the E was bright. It was part of the chord here. And as soon as you change the bass line, it is no longer part of the chord. And so there's like a tension and release when you get to the D. And all that said, all that complete explanation just to say you have to use this fingering, 2, 4, 5. And I've had literal arguments, like friendly arguments, but with other students when I've taught this, saying, well, 2, 4, 5 is so uncomfortable. I hate that fingering. And I'm just going to do 1, 3, 5, which is a traditional fingering for that chord shape. That's fine, except then the thumb has to lift and you miss that E, tension, suspension, which then results into the D. But if you use the 2 here, then you can hold it over and connect to 1, and you're able to bring out that harmony more. So again, very small detail there, but for me, that's what music making is all about. It's really making every moment stand out and every moment worth it, and to not only make sense to the ear, but just make sense to you personally. You'll memorize more securely, you'll enjoy the process better, and in the long run, you actually become a much deeper musician through details like that. So in any case, I think that's about as much as could be said for it before you personally put any time into this piece. This is actually something I recommend every piano student ever learns. Of course, not if you're in, let's say, the first year of your study, but well, it depends. Maybe a first year student could do it. But at some point, even a professional should really take a look at this, a careful look to understand patterns, harmony, counterpoint, fingering, chord connections, pedaling, ornaments, articulation. Like there is just an unbelievable amount that can be learned from a piece like this. And a professional could sight read it, but still have a lot to think about and a handle in it. So in any case, enjoy your study. My friends, if you got value from this video, it's just a small taste of what I do with you personally inside the Key Learners Piano Club. Every week, I help serious adult pianists from total beginner to lifelong players think, practice, and play at a much deeper level. Inside, you'll get live classes with me every week, 400 searchable trainings on every piano topic you can imagine, and personalized feedback on your own progress and musical journey. It's the most complete system I've ever built for helping you to make consistent, meaningful progress at the piano. KLPC is a safe community of like-minded people who want to see you grow even more than you do yourself, where you will be treated like a pro even as an amateur. And don't just take my word for it. Here's what 3 of our members have said in the last couple months. With KLPC, I learned more in 1 week than in 2 weeks with my private teacher. KLPC coaching is personal, caring, tailor-made, and above all, life-changing. KLPC gives me the personalized feedback and has taught me the importance of practice, setting goals, and being focused. As a bonus, I really enjoy the community there. So, if you're ready to experience that same level of clarity and growth, join me inside the Key Learners Piano Club. Start your free trial today before committing to anything. The link is in the description below. Because when you learn to think at this level, every day becomes a masterclass in your journey.